Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Max Wilbert. I am a community organizer, co-founder of Protect Thacker Pass, a writer, and a photographer. And with me today is Will Falk, who is also a beautiful writer, a poet, a good friend of mine, an attorney, and the man who co-founded the Protect Thacker Pass campaign with me more than 2 years ago now. So, Will, it's good to be here with you.
Hey Max, it's great to be here. Great to be here with everyone who is following along the campaign. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
So this is going to be a pretty informal update on what is going on in the Protect Thacker Pass campaign, broadly speaking. If folks are watching and have questions for us, you can drop those in the comments on Facebook, and we are going to try and get to as many of those as we can. But today we want to at least touch on the big news that's happened in the last couple of weeks. There were two major events, well, really three. The first was that Lithium Americas, which is the parent company of Lithium Nevada, announced that they have signed an agreement with General Motors, the largest car company in North America, the deal is basically General Motors is going to provide $650 million in funding to Lithium Americas, specifically for Thacker Pass. And in return, they're going to receive exclusive rights to buy the lithium that is produced from Thacker Pass if the mine is built. We don't mean to allow that to happen. But I'm curious, Will, what were your thoughts when you first saw that this deal was announced and as it started to go through?
Well, I think the connection with the General Motors Corporation should illustrate, what's really going on with this mine. Despite the Lithium Nevada Corporation trying to build this mine as somehow green and environmentally friendly, they're partnering with one of the most environmentally destructive corporations the planet has ever seen, the General Motors Corporation. And I just think it's a great connection for people to make to understand that while General Motors needs to buy lithium from the Thacker Pass lithium mine project site, they also have to be involved in things like steel manufacturing, plastic manufacturing, glass manufacturing, in order to create their electric cars. So this lithium supply chain is only one of the supply chains that is necessary for car manufacturing, whether we're talking about traditional fossil fuel-based cars or electric cars. So I think the fact that General Motors and Lithium Nevada and Lithium Americas are joining forces should show us that this is not about saving the planet. This is about making money. And the General Motors Corporation has made a lot of money destroying large parts of the United States and the world. And I think that connection should be here to people who are following along and who care about the natural world.
I'm looking right now at a tweet that Lithium Americas put out there on Thursday, the 16th. I'm sharing it right here. It's a photo of the electric Hummer, which is really interesting to me in particular because I came of age and grew up and started to become more politically aware in the early 2000s, late 90s, the era when the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan took place. And those of us who were following the news closely at the time understood that it was happening under false pretenses, largely to secure access to oil. And at that time, the Hummer became a symbol of conspicuous consumption, of an almost uniquely American drive in the culture for this marriage of power, conspicuous consumption, and military force. Those two things go together so well. And to me, the Hummer is such an emblem of an American car culture that is profoundly destructive to the planet. So the fact that here we have Lithium Americas promoting an electric Hummer on their platform and speaking out about this as if it's a good thing, as if this is going to help save the planet. There was just a report, interestingly, that came out in the past week or two. We were discussing it in Protect Thacker Pass among ourselves, that talked about how with the current electric utility grid in the United States, which is powered largely by natural gas, coal, hydropower, nuclear, a smaller percentage of solar and wind, an electric Hummer, because it is such a large vehicle, these are, I believe, something like twice the weight of a traditional Hummer because they require such a large battery to accelerate a vehicle like that from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds. That they're so heavy, they require so much energy to charge that this car, this electric Hummer, actually produces more carbon emissions than a regular gasoline-powered sedan. That is so emblematic of what we have been talking about from the very beginning of this campaign in terms of the problems with this whole idea of electric vehicles, that they can save us from global warming. This myth is being exemplified right here. It's being put up front and center by Lithium Americas, and they're almost rubbing people's faces in it, saying that they want to turn this place that you see behind me in this photograph, Thacker Pass, this beautiful, incredible, spectacular, sacred, important place. They want to blow it up, destroy it, render it down into dust, literally into powder, and then turn that into batteries for that vehicle right there, the electric Hummer. It is a slap in the face, to anyone who cares about Thacker Pass, to anyone who cares about sustainability, about justice, about climate change, about sacred places, about indigenous rights and democracy. It is an affront to all of us. So as you can tell, I get pissed when I start talking about it immediately. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should all get pissed. I think, it's like like you're saying about Thacker Pass, it's not just Thacker Pass. You have to think of all the dozens of places like Thacker Pass that will be destroyed to create those Hummers too. I mean, we're talking about Appalachia and mountaintop coal removal, or mountaintop removal for coal. That is involved in again, things like steel manufacturing. You have to talk about all of the wastes that are produced from those things, the waste that, there's been big stories about problems with the Ohio River. All of that goes into the Mississippi River. We know that they call the lower Mississippi Cancer Alley. And all of that is from things like car manufacturing, steel production, plastic production, all of which go into these cars. So they're not just destroying Thacker Pass, which is a beautiful place, but they're destroying dozens of other beautiful places around the world to get the materials that they need to make these products. And it's absolutely something that we should all be angry about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's something that we've also tried to highlight from the beginning of this campaign, is that Thacker Pass is particularly important to us, right? Because we've been fighting for it, because we've fallen in love with this place. It's particularly important to the communities who rely on it for water, to the people who go there to hunt and gather medicines, to the indigenous people who go there to learn about their history and the history of the massacres, right? And some of the things that we've learned about over the last 2 years that have come out into the public view about the cultural importance of the place. And at the same time, Thacker Pass is just one part of these global supply chains. This is something that I think is very important when we start to think about alternatives. Just yesterday, I had somebody send me a question about whether hemp batteries could be a solution. And my response to that is that I don't think they can, because the problem is not just the lithium. So if you replace the lithium with hemp, you still have the other components of the battery. You still probably need some sort of other minerals like copper, nickel. Look into those mining processes. They're just as destructive. You still need the car itself, all the other components that go into the car, from the rubber, the artificial rubber that's made from fossil fuels in the tires, to all the plastics in the interior of a car, the composites that go into the bodies of vehicles, the steel and so on. Then you have the broader social implications of building a society that's based on cars. You have the need for freeways, the need for parking lots. You have urban sprawl and increasing suburbanization as you build an increasingly car-dependent society. There are all these other effects downstream. So I think we need to be sure we're thinking about these issues deeply, and not just saying lithium is the problem, but going beyond. So I mentioned earlier that there were 3 big events that happened. That was the first one, General Motors signing this agreement with Lithium Americas, which I'm convinced that they will come to regret, because we're not going to stop. We're not going to give up on this fight. And I know that's true of everyone who's watching, everyone who's supported this campaign. I've seen an incredible amount of determination from the local communities, from the tribes, from the environmentalists, from you, Will, and I see it in myself. We're not going to stop fighting for this place until it's protected forever. The second major event that took place recently was the end of the original lawsuits that were filed against the Thacker Pass project. So Will, could you explain what those original lawsuits were, what they weren't, and what happened last Monday? It was last Monday, right? Almost 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks, I believe. Yeah. So I think the first thing is just to understand what the decision in that case actually was. The judge ruled against all of the plaintiffs on all of our arguments except for one. And that was an argument that was advanced primarily by the environmental plaintiffs in the lawsuit. What the issue was, what the judge had a problem with, is that for the Thacker Pass lithium mine project, there is an area, I think it's about 1,300 acres as part of the project plan, that Lithium Nevada wants to bury under the waste rock that the open pit would result in. So when they're creating the open pit, they're going to have all this waste rock. That waste rock has got to go somewhere, and that somewhere is this 1,300 acre area within Thacker Pass. It looks like a prerequisite to being able to use what's called the 1872 General Mining Law and gaining the sorts of right to mine that the General Mining Law provides people who make valid mineral claims on public lands is exactly what I just said. If you're going to gain the rights under that 1872 mining law, you have to locate valuable minerals and verify that you've actually found valuable minerals on the land that you want to destroy for your mine. So in this case, the Bureau of Land Management, the government agency responsible for permitting the mine, did not verify whether Lithium Nevada actually had valid mineral claims for that 1,300 acres. This seems to be a strategy that federal agencies are taking. The regulations are often written in a way that make it ambiguous about what the agency's responsibilities are for actually validating these claims. So oftentimes what federal agencies are doing is they're just taking the corporation's word for it. And if a corporation tells them they they've located valid minerals, then the agencies are just saying, well, okay, we have no responsibility to actually verify that. We're going to take that. We're going to take your word for it and grant you permits like the Thacker Pass lithium mine permit. So what the judge in this case did was she said, no, you do actually have to locate valuable minerals under the waste rock pile. So she is letting the rest of the 18,000 acre Thacker Pass lithium mine project go forward, but she will not let them bury that 1,300 acres under waste rock until BLM actually verifies whether there is valuable minerals and whether Lithium Nevada has actually located valuable minerals under that land that they want to put the waste rock pile on.
What does this mean? What does this, how do you translate this for the average person who's watching, who's not a lawyer, doesn't know anything about environmental permitting and mining permitting in this country? What was the outcome of that lawsuit?
Basically that the mine can go forward. All of the mine can go forward except for work on that 1,300 acres. I would imagine, I don't know exactly what the specific construction steps Lithium Nevada plans to follow to construct the mine. But given that the waste rock pile would be needed primarily once the open pit was actually being dug and lithium was started to be extracted from Thacker Pass. I think that's probably several years down the road before they would be getting to that point. So they'd be allowed to do all kinds of other sort of ancillary or supportive construction, building different facilities that they would need, digging new roads, digging new test pits and wells and those kinds of things. It
sounds like it's a defeat. That lawsuit was a defeat for our side, for those of us who are opposing the mine.
Yes, I would think so. I should just say a resounding yes. For me personally, I represented the Reno Sparks Indian Colony in this last lawsuit. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony lost all of the arguments. I guess that's sort of a tricky way to say it. Really, the judge in this case was only considering one argument from the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, and that argument was whether or not the Bureau of Land Management violated the law when it chose not to notify the Reno Sparks Indian Colony about the Thacker Pass project. That was the only decision that she made, and the only arguments that she would consider. So in American administrative law, which is what you call broadly this kind of law, so much the law is written in such a way that judges can only overturn an agency's decision if that decision is arbitrary or capricious, is the terms. And the documentation that the judge considers the evidence, if we were in like a criminal trial or something, the evidence that the judge reviews is only the documentation that the agency had in front of them when they made the decision to issue the permit. So in this last case, the judge was not considering any information that BLM received after the Thacker Pass record of decision was issued on January 15th, 2021. There's been a lot of stuff happen in the last 2 years, and a lot more new violations of the law from our perspective that simply were not reviewed in this last case. yeah, the Reno Sparks Indian Colony lost, and given that the project can go forward on everything but that small part of the project, I think it was a sound defeat.
So I know that sounds bad for people. We're going to transition next to talk about what just happened on Thursday, the 3 tribes filing a new lawsuit against the Thacker Pass lithium mine, which seems to be promising. I also want to ask you about appeals, whether appeals are possible for the previous case, whether that's being pursued by any of the parties. But before I do so, for those who are watching the stream, for those who have just joined us, my name is Max Wilbert. I'm the co-founder of Protect Thacker Pass. I'm here with Will Falk, the other co-founder of that organization. Will's an attorney. He has represented the Reno Sparks Indian Colony in a previous lawsuit over this Thacker Pass lithium mine issue. And he's representing Reno Sparks as well as the Summit Lake Paiute tribe in the new lawsuit that was just filed this past Thursday. We have been fighting this mine, fighting to protect Thacker Pass, this land that you see behind me in this photograph, for over 2 years now, dedicating ourselves to this fight. I hope I don't embarrass Will too much by saying that he has been doing this work pro bono as a lawyer. He has done work that's probably worth hundreds of thousands of dollars if he were being paid for it, and he hasn't charged the tribes a penny. And he has done that while running down his life savings, basically living in a basement that he got for free from a friend and a family member to make this work. So if folks want to support this fight, there are a lot of ways to get involved. Go to protectthackerpass.org. You can donate to support this, despite the fact that Will's doing this work for free. Not all lawyers do that. There are a lot of legal costs associated with a lawsuit like this, with a campaign like this. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars to make this work happen and continue. And while Lithium Americas has a budget of, they just got $330 million from General Motors the other day, we're working on literally a fraction of a penny of that. Less than 1% of 1% of that budget is what we're working with. So if you can donate, kick us $10, $5, 500, whatever you can do, it all makes a difference. And it is being used well in this fight. This money is not being squandered. It's not going to pay for a fancy office. I'm doing this live stream right now from a good friend of mine's son's bedroom, who I'm visiting. Will is again staying with a close friend of ours and getting a room for free because he can't afford rent in an expensive city. He can't afford rent anywhere else. He's trying to focus on this work 100%. And I'm just trying to be real about this. So we're not driving fancy cars, buying nice clothes, or making out like bandits in this. We're trying to focus on protecting this land. And the donations go directly to that. It's to fund the legal work, to help support this media outreach, to make it possible for us to print materials, to make videos, to get this story out there, and to keep going. So the link to the fundraiser should be down in the chat below. So any donations are very much appreciated. We're also going to be taking some questions here shortly. So keep those questions coming in the chat on Facebook, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. But the good news that I want to talk about is, well, first, Will, let's talk about the appeal just very briefly. Is there an appeal possible on this previous court case? And is that being pursued by the tribes or any of the parties?
An appeal, yeah, is still possible. Yeah, there yeah, there still could be an appeal. I'm not sure exactly what everyone's plans in the case are, but an appeal is possible.
Okay. So then, as far as the new lawsuit, so this past Thursday in the late evening, I know you all were working really hard trying to get this in. And I believe it was filed around 8 p.m. after what, probably a 10 or 12-hour day of working on it, putting the final touches on this lawsuit. 3 tribes filed an entirely new lawsuit against the federal government over this Thacker Pass lithium mine. So, Will, who are those tribes? I know that you're representing two of those tribes, but also they have their own spokespeople, their own voices, and I don't want to presume to speak on their behalf. Certainly not when they have incredible spokespeople like Chairman Melendez, like Michon Eben, the TIPO from Tribal Historic Preservation Officer from Reno Sparks, like Diane Tiemann from the Burns Paiute tribe, like Chairwoman Lone Eagle from the Summit Lake Paiute tribe. These very powerful, passionate, well-spoken, talented individuals who have been so stalwart in this fight. Can you tell us a little bit about this lawsuit and what has been happening, what happened on Thursday, and what is likely to play out over the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, first I represent the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Summit Lake Paiute tribe in this new lawsuit. We've joined forces with the Burns Paiute tribe. So three regional tribes here that all attach religious and cultural significance to Thacker Pass. So the basis of the new lawsuit, first and foremost, it deals primarily with what's called a post-review discovery process. Once the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and other tribes were notified about the Thacker Pass project months after the Thacker Pass permit was actually issued, they notified Bureau of Land Management that they consider all of the Thacker Pass area what's called a traditional cultural property. And there's certain consultation obligations that federal agencies have to fulfill if they're going to destroy traditional cultural property. So I want to be very clear there. Just because, and I think people should be outraged by this, but most people don't understand this. There's not a law that says that just because Native American tribes consider an area sacred, if it's on public lands and if there are valid minerals located there, the position of the government is that they have to give the mining permit to destroy that place. There's not a law that we can invoke that says, oh, this is the most sacred place in the world to, say, Paiute people. And because it's the most sacred place in the world, you can't put your mine here. That's not the law. It just says that because it's the most sacred place in the world to us, you have to consult with us about it. You have to talk to us about why it's important and things you could do to maybe avoid, harming it, or what they call mitigation, coming up with ways to soften the effect of the destruction. I don't want people to misunderstand me. I'm not saying that Thacker Pass is the most sacred place in the world to Paiute people. I'm just using that as an example. Because this is the traditional cultural property of the three tribes in this lawsuit, BLM was obligated to do more to consult about this project, but they were also obligated to do more to research what was there in Thacker Pass. So in July of 2021, the tribes presented the tribes pointed the Bureau of Land Management to the Bureau of Land Management's own records of the September 12th, 1865 massacre, which occurred in Thacker Pass. So the Bureau of Land Management houses this body of documents called the General Land Office records. And those are some of the first records that they're supposed to check when they're starting a project like this. And if they would have done that,
looking for just stuff like this, right?
Exactly, stuff like this, yes. And, they possessed those records. They either didn't find them, or they did find them and figured it'd be best not to share these with the public. So the tribes in July, or maybe it was August of 2021, presented BLM, or pointed out that these records existed. And eventually, a few months later, the Bureau of Land Management realized that it had to initiate this post-review discovery process. So under the National Historic Preservation Act, which is just the name of the main law at play here, if you have already permitted a project, construction hasn't started yet, which construction under the Thacker Pass record of decision has not started yet in Thacker Pass. If that construction hasn't happened, the law requires the agency to basically afford the consultation to the tribes that they would have gotten before the permit, what they would have been entitled to before the permit was issued. So BLM did say, okay, we recognize that this massacre site is in the project area, so we will initiate this post-review discovery process. But the tribes have explained that they believe that the 1865 massacre site, not to mention the whole Thacker Pass, what they're calling a traditional cultural district, extends across Thacker Pass, and that encompasses the whole Thacker Pass project area. So the tribes have explained this to BLM. BLM, without acknowledging the tribe's expertise in this analysis, has decided that they're only going to recognize a small little, I think it's about 100-acre sort of postage stamp of land, as being the massacre site. And this massacre site is just on private land. And because it's conveniently on private land, BLM claims that it can't do anything to mitigate harm to the massacre site. So it doesn't have to do anything else with that massacre site. This is outrageous, because so many tribes have explained to BLM that the massacre site is more than just where the people went to sleep the night that they were murdered. The historical documents describe a running battle. The soldiers' accounts of what happened describe things like caches of food that were buried around the area. When we look at how government agencies deal with other massacre sites, the Sand Creek massacre site in Colorado, for example, where hundreds of Native Americans were massacred by the U.S. cavalry in 1864, the Bureau of Land Management's recognition of that site started in a similar way. It only wanted to recognize a very small area as the massacre site. But through the hard work of a lot of grassroots folk, that massacre site is, I think it's around 50,000 acres is recognized, because Congress actually designated, by listening to testimony and oral history about what happened during the Sand Creek massacre, they expanded the landmass to include things like the approach the soldiers took, the place where the soldiers themselves were camped the night before the massacre, the escape routes of any survivors, the different there were horse herd that the people there had gathered, and they consider all of that to be the massacre site. So a big part of this new lawsuit is that BLM is just ignoring this information and not engaging with the tribes about the entire extent of the 1865 massacre site. There is one more wrinkle to this, which is we found out in September that Lithium Nevada had gained approvals from the Bureau of Land Management to begin work on these old permits that Lithium Nevada possessed in the Thacker Pass area. And these were permits that Lithium Nevada explained in what's called the Mine Plan of Operations, which is sort of the document that governs what the corporation is allowed to do once they get the permit. And within the terms and conditions of that Mine Plan of Operations, they specifically said they were going to terminate these older permits. So the Thacker Pass Record of Decision was issued on January 15th, 2021. By the terms and conditions of the Plan of Operations, those permits were supposed to have been terminated. So when we found out in September, just last year, 2022, 5 months ago, that those permits were now being resurrected, we've had to scramble to try and tell BLM that, you know, the work being done under those old permits is affecting the massacre site. So BLM hasn't stopped Lithium Nevada from doing that, and has in fact approved more and more work under those old permits, expanded the scope of those old permits, and is allowing Lithium Nevada to destroy my clients' traditional cultural properties without finishing the very consultation process that BLM said the tribes would get. So that is the basis and the main gist of the new lawsuit.
Okay, thank you very much, Will. And the new lawsuit also sees the Summit Lake Paiute tribe join in to the tribes who had previously been involved in litigation, the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Burns Paiute tribe. I know that's significant because the BLM stated in their permit, in their decision on Thacker Pass that they released in early 2021, they said that they consulted with the Summit Lake Paiute tribe. The Summit Lake Paiute tribe says that did not happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's an important part of this too. In all of the what are called the National Environmental Policy Act documents, the documents that BLM shows the public, that kind of puts the public on notice about what's going on, documents like the environmental impact statement, which is sort of the main document that records just, you know, what is going to be destroyed by projects like these. But in those documents, BLM said that it had been consulting with the Fort McDermott tribe, the Winnemucca Indian Colony, and the Summit Lake Paiute tribes in 2017. It also, maybe even worse, it represented to other government agencies that it needed specific concurrences from, it needed specific agreements from these government agencies that they had in fact followed the process and the procedures. So for example, BLM told the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, which is one of those government agencies that they're legally required to gain concurrence from, told the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office that tribal consultation with those three tribes was ongoing and that it had begun in 2017. Well,
so they lied.
They lied. And we know in April of 2021, when those three tribes finally received the letters from BLM, and all three of these tribes, upon receiving a letter from BLM about the January 15th, 2021 record of decision being issued, all three of these tribes were like, what the heck? Like, this is the first we're hearing of this project. And all those tribes wrote letters to BLM saying, you never consulted with us since 2017 or ever about this project. That was not, those letters were very specifically excluded from the last case because they were letters sent after the record of decision was issued, and because none of those three tribes were actually a part of that lawsuit. So now the Summit Lake Paiute tribe is a party to this new lawsuit, and we're going to be proving that BLM did not consult with the Summit Lake Paiute tribe, or the other two tribes for that matter, and misrepresented that it had to these other agencies in order to get the checkoffs that they needed. And I think I imagine or I can predict that government agencies are doing this, taking advantage of sort of ambiguous language to misrepresent the extent of things like tribal consultation. And I think we should all be, really concerned that government agencies often say that they engage in tribal consultation when they never have. So that'll be a big part of this case too.
Lies, collusion, misleading, misdirection, cooperation with the corporation to destroy these lands at the expense of the public, the tribes, the wildlife, the local communities, the water. It's the same story we've heard in a lot of different places before. It's really nothing different. The only thing different here is that this is a lithium mine. This is supposedly the new green extraction, the new green material that's going to power all the electric vehicles that are going to save us from global warming. That's what they say. So thanks for the update, Will. The final question I have for you about the lawsuit, and then we'll dive into some of these questions here and start to wrap up, is what are the next steps here? What are the best case and worst case scenarios over the coming weeks and months? Because I know that, for example, that tweet that I shared earlier from Lithium America said construction is quote unquote imminent at Thacker Pass. So we know from their own words that they are planning to go to Thacker Pass with heavy equipment, machinery, bulldozers, explosives, all the rest, and begin destroying the place in earnest very soon. I mean, it could be it could be starting today. I would probably have gotten word about it if it was. They could be starting tomorrow. They could be starting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, next week. So this is urgent in some senses. How could things play out in terms of this legal fight and the overall campaign over the coming weeks? If you could just summarize that briefly for people who don't have any legal expertise and don't understand all the basics, but in terms of the land itself and what the land is facing over coming weeks and months, what do you see? What's the best case? What's the worst case?
Well, I guess what's the reality right now? There's nothing, there's no legal obstacle in front of Lithium Nevada that would stop them from beginning construction on the Thacker Pass mine. There's also right now, there's no legal obstacle in front of Lithium Nevada for continuing construction on these old permits.
And let me just clarify that for everyone watching. So as a lawyer, you're saying that this new lawsuit doesn't automatically mean you have to stop construction. You can't destroy Thacker Pass until the lawsuit is completed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's always the case in law. Just because somebody files a lawsuit, that doesn't mean that things just stop. There are mechanisms you can gain something like what's called a preliminary injunction, which is just a court order to hold things at the status quo to not allow construction to happen. But just because a lawsuit is filed, that does not mean that construction just stops. So yeah, right now there's just because we filed a lawsuit, that does not mean that Lithium Nevada, from a legal perspective, legally, it is not illegal for Lithium Nevada to start constructing out there.
So worst case scenario, it sounds like you're saying they could show up tomorrow and start destroying Thacker Pass pretty much full scale, more or less, right? And so what's the best case scenario legally? What could this lawsuit achieve? Could this put a kibosh on the whole project and stop it completely forever, or what?
So again, for cases involving mining on public land, the best that the legal process, and I'll clarify this in a second, that the legal process, so if, for example, we won this new lawsuit, what the judge would do, like a win, a full-on victory, would be the judge vacating the Thacker Pass record of decision, the permit that they have right now. So undoing that permit, which would not get, that would mean Lithium Nevada no longer has the authority to proceed under the Thacker Pass record of decision on that, with mine construction. But if that happened, they would be free to reject the permit application. BLM would be free to engage in tribal consultation and conclude that process. Tribal consultation about historic properties or sacred sites, just be consultation, the agency doesn't have to do what the tribes tell them to do. The agency just has to listen, just has to say, okay, thanks for telling us your position. That's great. We don't want to do it. We're going to blow this place up. But they do have to afford the tribes that opportunity. They have to give the tribes an opportunity to try and convince the agency to redesign the project, or do something to avoid historic properties. So yeah, it's important to know that if a corporation is and their shareholders, because I guess one way that the legal process can indirectly stop a project is if it just appears to shareholders that projects like these are going to be hung up in legal na-na land for years, where they're not going to see any return on their investment, and those shareholders start to pull their money out to the point that Lithium Nevada doesn't have the capital it needs to construct the mine. That could be a way that the mine is stopped, but that won't be because of a judge's order. It would just be because of the judge making them go back and redo things. It would take longer, and investors get impatient and they pull their money. So yeah, it's just always important for people to remember what law is actually capable of in these kinds of campaigns, and it's a very limited tool for actually stopping these projects.
Thank you for that. It's good to hear that coming out of the mouth of a lawyer. Law is not the most powerful tool at our disposal. It's one tool among many. So for everyone watching, that's Will Falk. He's an attorney representing the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Summit Lake Paiute Tribe in a new lawsuit against the Thacker Pass lithium mine. He's also a co-founder of Protect Thacker Pass, along with myself, Max Wilbert. We had a protest camp set up on site at Thacker Pass from January 15th, 2021, the day that the permit was approved for the project, until about October, when we were forced to shut that camp down. The Bureau of Land Management is actually coming after Will and I right now, trying to fine us $49,890.13 for the crime of erecting a latrine on public lands for Native elders to use the bathroom while they were engaged at ceremony, and coming up to Thacker Pass to pray and visit the site and talk with us and spend time on the land in this place that's so culturally important. We're not making that up. We had been going to the bathroom behind the sagebrush, as the saying goes, but we specifically got requests to build a latrine from elders who said, we can't do that. We're elderly. We can't go out there. We need a better bathroom situation up here. This is a remote area. And so we did that. We put that toilet together with the help of other people from the community. Basic latrine, composting toilet, you could call it. One of the most sustainable ways to deal with human waste, no long-term impact to the land. In fact, just provides fertilizer for the plants ultimately. And the BLM is coming after us for almost $50,000 in fine money because of that. This campaign has been going on for a long time now. It's going to continue. We need support to help this lawsuit continue, to get people out on the ground, keeping an eye on things, participating. This is a movement. And it's not going to be over just because a lawsuit has been filed. Even if that lawsuit is successful, it's not going to end there. This has to come with organizing, political organizing. We have to get together, work together, collaborate, and organize to protect this place. And it's going to take every one of us. This has been a movement that has been so incredible in bringing together different people. The amount of power, the amount of incredible people who have made sacrifices and done work in such a heartfelt way for this place is really incredible. So I know some of them are probably watching right now, and you know who you are. All of you folks who have been out to the protest camp when that was in place, who have donated, who have attended events and helped organize events, who have participated in the prayers, in the runs, the walks, in the rallies, who have spoken to media and helped spread the word. If you want to get involved, check out protectthackerpass.org. There's a link in the chat below. There's also a donate link there. So if folks want to support this work, we need some funds to help keep this going. So we've been on for a lot longer. We said this was just going to be half an hour, but I've got a big mouth and I can't stop talking. So let's run through some questions, rapid fire style here, Will. Just short answers. We can go back and forth. So first, why is Thacker Pass not as sacred as the monument for 9/11 or Arlington National Cemetery? Why don't you take that one?
I think it is.
But the law does not recognize it as such.
The law does not recognize it as such, but that's, you know, that's part of what we're arguing and trying to establish, that for Paiute, Western Shoshone people who descend from people who lived in this area from time immemorial, it's absolutely should be considered as sacred as.
Yeah. And I would just say that as somebody who's not descended from those people, it's sacred to me too. It's, you know, I have a different worldview. I'm not from that culture. I'm not from that cultural tradition and background at all. But in my worldview, in my spirituality, in my relationship with land and water and place, it's very sacred to me too. And I know many people who are not from there, who have visited, feel the same way, feel the energy and the power of that place. So next question, what is known about the role of the Alberta tar sands in the Thacker Pass project? I can tackle this one. So very briefly, Lithium Nevada plans to use sulfuric acid to pull the lithium out of the clay soil in Thacker Pass. So this land behind me that you see in the picture, it's all clay soil under the ground. They want to dig that up, use sulfuric acid to separate out the lithium from the rest of the dirt and the gravel and so on, and then use that to construct batteries. Sulfuric acid is made using sulfur, and the main source of sulfur is oil refineries. So at oil refineries, what happens is that they pull sulfur out of crude oil in order to produce low sulfur fuels. So those of you who are a bit older than me probably remember the big acid rain scares of years ago, when you had big acid rain problems in the United States and elsewhere around the world. You have entire forests dying, you have wetlands and rivers and waterways being affected. One of the results of those problems is that rules were implemented that gasoline had to be low in sulfur. And so that's why these oil refineries now do this processing where they separate sulfur out. And one of the highest sulfur fuel sources in the world is the Alberta tar sands. It's very dirty oil and it's full of sulfur. So at these refineries that process tar sands, you have gigantic piles, mountains of sulfur building up. You can Google this and see pictures of these bright yellow mounds of sulfur. That sulfur is then sold by the tar sands companies to other users, like mining companies, who want to use it to create sulfuric acid. So this is why there's a direct link between the Thacker Pass project and the tar sands. The sulfur. It's not a small amount of sulfur here. We're talking about millions and millions of tons. For those of you who've been to New York City and seen the Empire State Building, Imagine 2 Empire State Buildings made of sulfur. That's how much sulfur Lithium Nevada wants to use every single year, bringing into Thacker Pass on trucks to make sulfuric acid. Okay, next question. We're trying to rapid fire these. Again, I got a big mouth. So this person asked, what type of car should we be pushing for? I want to do the right thing, but I don't know what to do now. I thought the electric car was the right way to go. What is the right way to go? Will, why don't you jump in first?
Well, I think we need to I think we need to recognize that there's way more tactics to be employed against the destruction of the planet, against extraction in mines than our consumptive choices. And I think, in so many ways, that's exactly where they want us hung up on is what, if our response is I hate mining, what should I buy? Then in so many ways they've already won. So I think to me, the question I would, you buying or not buying a certain car is going to have virtually no impact on whether they're going to put these mines in or not. So, to me, I would encourage you to kind of free yourself from feeling really guilty about being born into this car culture that none of us had a say in developing. None of us were asked whether we wanted to be dependent upon automobiles to get around or to work our jobs. And so, I wouldn't feel guilty about that, but I would switch my focus to how do I make the biggest impact against these extractive processes as I possibly can. And I do encourage people to think really, really big. This is one reason why I'm involved in this, is because when I ask myself, what needs to be done, instead of what can I do, when I ask myself what needs to be done, I see things like, well, we need to protect Thacker Pass. And so working backwards from that, Max and I think from the very beginning, really committed to trying to consistently ask ourselves, what is the most important thing for Thacker Pass? How do we achieve that? Not like, can we achieve it, or is it going to be really hard to achieve? We just ask, what needs to happen to stop this mine? And then we try and go about figuring that out and making it happen however we can. And I've started to really, look, we're living at a time when between 100 and 200 species are going extinct every day. We're literally stealing our lives from the future. Like the materials that are needed to support us right now means those materials are not going to be available for so many generations of humans and non-humans that follow us. We're living at a time where ecological collapse is entirely possible. And so
Happening now, in fact.
it's happening all the time right now. So I'm not, I get frustrated with, trying to tell people, here's things you can do. And more, really confronting people like, if we care about our children and our grandchildren, if we care about the other than human world, I think that we all need to be making sacrifices and doing work that at times we just never thought was possible. This is, the only livable habitat we know of in the universe right now. And it may not be here in 100 years. So, I don't know that we don't really get to have a life, unfortunately. The generations that came before us partied down with oil, partied down with agriculture, and got these great lives. Unfortunately, that means that the people who follow after us are not going to be able to have those lives. And if we want to make their lives better, I think in a lot of ways, we have to sacrifice our time and labor, and make sure that there's a livable planet after this. I know that's harsh, but that's just where I've come to.
Yep. Well said, Will. I love your quote about it's not about what we can do, it's about what needs to be done. And then once you reframe it like that, it helps understand why it's not about what I buy or the personal choices I make about those products. You know, I try and be ethical in my personal behavior, of course. I'm not going to buy an electric Hummer or a regular Hummer. That's not reflective of who I am and my values. But we need to put our energy where it's really required, where it's actually going to make the biggest difference possible. Because these companies, they're the ones who want us to focus on buying products. Are you going to buy this or are you going to buy this? Either way, they win and the planet loses, right? Either way, the situation gets worse. So I think it's very important and well said. We need to reframe that. So I'm going to skip over a couple questions here because I think we've answered them already in the broadcast. Somebody says, what else can I do to help protect Thacker Pass? That's a bit of the question we were just addressing, but go to the website. There's information on there. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can donate. You can send us a message. Tell us who you are, what your skills are, what you can offer, how you want to get involved. And also, don't feel like you have to necessarily follow our lead or something like that. There are a lot of people who are involved in this campaign who are working at different levels somewhat independently. And we all try and communicate and coordinate, share resources and so on. But, I know Will, with all the legal work that he's got going on, does not have time to micromanage volunteers and tell people exactly what to do. So part of what we need people to do is find the motivation in yourself to keep going, despite being confused sometimes, despite not always knowing what's the exact right way to go, despite frustration. Those are feelings that we all experience sometimes because this work is hard, but we need to keep doing it regardless. So will there be a spring gathering on the land? There may be, absolutely. I was just out there with some people from different regional tribes a couple of weeks ago. There were some prayers put down and some ceremony done out there. And there are people in and out of the area regularly. As far as I'm concerned, we need people out there. We need people on the land. We need people watching the land and ready to defend it. Let's see. Question, does the Infrastructure Act, the new infrastructure law, exempt the mine from environmental law? Will?
No, I guess the first thing to understand is that environmental laws are incredibly weak around the world. If they were strong, all of this destruction wouldn't be happening. And most of the laws are specifically set up not to stop the destruction, but to provide a government review of the destruction. So like the National Environmental Policy Act, for example, all of this environmental impact statement, those kinds of things, it's just documenting and telling the public these are the environmental problems that will happen because of the mine. It's not saying, oh, there's environmental problems, we can't do the mine. It's saying we're going to do the mine. Here's what's going to happen so that you can be informed. And that's the way that American regulatory law was set up. And so many countries around the world have modeled after that because it is brilliant. You think of you think of the Endangered Species Act and you're like, oh, there's endangered species there. They can't do something there. It's like, yeah, they can. They just have to pay for a permit before they kill those endangered species. That is, I think if we start to understand that that's how the American legal system is set up, it's set up as a way to make people feel like there's some sort of oversight over these things, while that oversight is totally cursory. Then it helps us to really understand. And so they don't need to exempt projects from certain environmental laws because those environmental laws are so weak in the first place. And another thing, there is this sort of classic capitalist mindset that we need to deregulate, but there's just as much of a capitalist mindset that actually is very supportive of regulations, because they know that the regulations distract the public. And when you put the government in charge of regulating things, all of a sudden you get all of the citizens pissed off at the government when it's really the corporations that are doing all the harm. And the corporations love this arrangement. They're like, sure, have some regulations, make them meaningless. We'll help you draft them. And then we'll get everybody caught up in all of these regulatory processes, filing lawsuits. And meanwhile, it does very little to actually interrupt. So my point is just, no, it doesn't exempt. It might expedite certain review processes, but they don't need to exempt projects from environmental laws, because those laws, for the most part, are totally nominal and not. They're never designed to actually stop construction.
Right. Thank you. One thing I will add, however, is that we have seen the waiving of environmental laws and other laws happen in the past with other projects. Recently, there was a notable case with the construction of the border wall. Former President Trump signed executive orders, which essentially waived the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Migratory Bird Conservation Act, the Bald and Gold Eagle Conservation Act, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these laws were essentially waived for this project because of ostensibly a national security issue. So that can happen. And that's something that we all have to be aware of and wary of, is that the Biden administration seems to perceive this Thacker Pass project as very important for national security, for economic development, and so on. And frankly, I'm worried at some level that at some point, if the lawsuits are too successful, if the legal angles are too successful in combating this project, that the government would simply step in, waive those laws, and say, all of your objections don't matter because getting this project built is more important. And that's where a political movement comes in. We have to organize, we have to work together, collaborate, build organization and power to push back against something like that happening. So, okay, last couple questions here. Well, again, we'll try and run through these real quick. Somebody asked about, is Thacker Pass considered public land? The answer is yes. This land is managed by the Bureau of Land Management on behalf of the American people. That's the legal status of the land. There was never a treaty signed with the Native American communities of this area. So this land is essentially seized by right of conquest. And that conquest happened in places like Thacker Pass, where the 1865 massacre took place. So the legal basis is conquest and is violence. But it is considered Bureau of Land Management land, public land, the entirety of it. The same person also asked about partnering with the Non-Human Rights Project. I'm not sure who that is. I'm not familiar with that organization, but we're always open to partnerships and collaborating, building alliances with different organizations. So if you're part of that group or know people who are, or if you're part of any other organizations, feel free to reach out and get in touch with us. Question, what would happen if they start construction and then the judge rules in favor of voiding the old permits?
A judge could order something like, paying for the destruction. But that is one of the basic premises of American law, which really sucks. And that is, if there's a lawsuit filed, and it's found that whatever conduct is challenged in that lawsuit was actually illegal. The law presumes that money can heal all wounds, so to speak. So yeah, it really sucks in the environmental context, because once they destroy some of these places, they'll just never be the same. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I say law is a really limited tool, because of issues like that.
Another legal question: can Pahimaha is a Paiute word for Thacker Pass, the original name. Can Pahimaha be given personhood status like the Klamath River was?
So I've actually been pretty involved in the rights of nature movement. And the issue with this is that Pahimaha is completely on federal land. So a lot of times in cases where you're finding tribes or local communities enacting personhood rights, their jurisdiction involves these lands. So Pahimaha is not tribal land. It's not on a reservation. And it's also it's not municipal land. So you have no city that could pass rights of nature as laws. The only way that you could give personhood to Pahimaha would be through an act of Congress. Congress is not stupid. Congress knows that in order for the American economy to operate, it can't be giving the land rights. It has to continue to define land as an object. And so I think, while yes, I agree that if Pahimaha had personhood status, and similar rights to, say, the corporation Lithium Nevada, that would absolutely be a great thing and something that I would fully support. However, I don't think that that's something that Congress is going to allow ever. One way I describe this is since the first Africans were stolen off the continent of Africa and brought to the United States, there's about 350 years where it took human beings to get full personhood status in this country, and for women it took even longer. And personhood status was only given to African American men after the bloodiest war in American history, and that we were talking about human beings at that point. So talking about trying to give personhood to the land, the capitalists and the corporations are going to resist that so strongly that I don't think you're going to be able to convince Congress to do something like that. Where you are seeing personhood rights being implemented, it's often through a smaller government, like a municipality. But of course, those laws, those personhood laws, are being challenged, and for the most part, they're being overturned as illegal. So it's sorry I went off on that one. I've just been involved in efforts like that, and I have thought of that, but it's not a tactic that I see being successful anytime soon.
If folks are interested in learning more about that, Will was actually part of the first lawsuit in United States history on behalf of a major ecosystem. The case was the Colorado River versus the state of Colorado. He wrote a very short book on it. It can be read in an afternoon easily, which is great. I think also most of that material is also available for free. That's in the book. He was writing a series of essays about it, so you don't have to pay a dime to read it. Just go to his website and check it out. We're going to wrap up, folks. We originally were only planning this to be 20 minutes, and we've gone 4 times that long. So I was not lying about my big mouth on these topics. Thank you so much to everyone who came and watched us. Thank you to all the supporters. Thank you to everyone who's fighting this fight. This is important work, and our work matters. You can't blow up a mountain and call it green. It's not right. It's not right to destroy this place. And so for all of the odds stacked against us, the power of this corporation, their money, the legal system, the police behind them, all of this power stacked against us, we have a lot on our side. We have the planet on our side, Earth itself. We have right on our side. And ultimately, we have to keep pushing forward. We have to keep moving forward no matter what. That's been our perspective on this fight from the very beginning. There have been a lot of times when it's looked dire, but we always keep going no matter what, because you're not defeated until it's actually over. And this fight is a long way from over. So folks, if you want to support, continue to be involved, go to protectthackerpass.org, check out the links below in the chat. And thank you all very much for watching. Thank you, Will, for being a part of this as well.
Thanks for having me.